Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Grants for Profit, Finding and Writing Grants for Your Store, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
Welcome, booksellers and others who might be here. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. You are in the room for Grants for Profit, Finding and Writing Grants for Your Store. So if you didn't mean to be here, then it's time to find another room. Yes. We have some housekeeping to take care of first. The slides and handouts are in the app and in the Winter Institute 2025 program. Feel free to fill out the session survey while you're still in the room seated as it's going along. Recordings of this will be on BookWeb and Booked in March. Please silence your cell phones and devices now. And if you have questions, please wait for the microphone to get to you so that the question also can be recorded as part of the video. Antitrust guidelines. You've probably heard this a lot already this conference. Booksellers are encouraged to share ideas and support during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits them from discussing pricing policies, boycotts, dividing up the market. For more information, see ABA's full antitrust guidelines on BookWeb. Okay. Session description. Today, we're going to talk about what a grant is, what a grant isn't. We're going to talk a little bit about the process for grants, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit entity, and then the kinds of things you can do to get ready for a grant, practical tips for the actual writing of the grant or putting together the application, and then also how to find a grant. There's a handout that I don't know if it's a physical handout or if it's just something that you can click on and download through the app, but that handout has links to places that you can start looking for grants. And also, while there are some nonprofits on this panel, this isn't a session about becoming a nonprofit bookstore, but there is going to be a How to Start a Nonprofit tomorrow at 2:30 session. So please, stay here for all the information you'll get today. But if you want to dig deeper into the actual nuts and bolts of starting a nonprofit, also attend tomorrow. Okay. So I am really excited for this topic in particular because I feel like a lot of certain months of the year I'm really consumed by writing grants for our bookstore. We are going to introduce ourselves. Everyone here either works in that or they do everything at their store and also write grants. And, or we also have a grant writing expert. We'll do name, bookstore location, and then your own experience writing grants. I'll start. My name is Veronica Santiago Liu. I'm with Word Up Community Bookshop, Libreria Comunitaria in Northern Manhattan in the neighborhood of Washington Heights. We are a nonprofit and we're a collectively run bookstore. So I act as the general coordinator of the collective. But a lot of the grants that we write, I do most or in some years, all of the grant writing. But some of the grants that we've written in the past have not all been specific to nonprofits. And then outside of Word Up, I've also written grants either as individuals as well. So that's my basic experience. And the grants that I've written have been for either small program grants through, local business entity or city or state grants as well.
I'm Liz Henry. I am with Mosaic Nonprofit Consulting. So I am a nonprofit consultant that is primarily focused on grant support for nonprofit clients with a couple of for-profit clients as well. And I am based here in Denver.
David Landry, Class Bookstore, Houston, Texas. I am not a grant writer by profession, but out of necessity. And so, yeah.
Hey, I'm Jamie Southern. I'm from Bookmarks in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We are a nonprofit organization that has a bookstore. I'm the executive director, so I do all of our grant writing in addition to other things.
We wanted to get a sense in the room of who here is, if there are nonprofit bookstores or, bookstores within nonprofit entities in the room. If you are from a nonprofit, can you raise your hand, please?
Okay.
And then how many others are for-profits, but then considering, going the nonprofit route or adding in some element? Okay.
Great.
Cool. Good to know. So our very first question on, funding in general, but what is a grant?
Yeah, so we want to just start with making sure we're all speaking the same language here. And so a grant is a source of funding that's awarded without the expectation of repayment. And they are often awarded either unrestricted, which is ideal but rare, or restricted to a specific use, whether that is capital, infrastructure kinds of use, or programmatic. And then just differentiating with other types of funding. Sponsorships, of course, are often related to events or specific things that are happening in the community. And then individual donor support. Some of your stores may have ways for customers to support you, add a donation in addition to their purchase, that kind of thing.
What are different ways that your stores have received?
You want to start?
Yeah. So, first, the first way was literally when we were putting together a business plan. So, January, February 2020 comes along. Dara and I were like, yes, this is the year to start class. And my wife kind of was driving around one day and she pulls up on this community organization called Project Row Houses. They're a pretty big deal in Houston. And so she goes in, she's like, we want to open a bookstore, but we don't know how. And so they're like, well, have you been to the EEDC, the Emancipation and Economic Development Council, which was right around the corner. So she goes there. And they're like, oh my God, this is awesome. You're getting ready to start a bookstore in Third Ward. That's great. Come by, do an interview. We did the interview. We got accepted into the cohort. The day the city of Houston shut down for the pandemic was the first day of this cohort. And so everything had to be switched from in-person to online. Long story short, at the end, even after the original entity said they weren't able to give us any money, we got called back to a short list. And they were like, hey, we got $1,000 grant for you. We can give you that because we really need a bookstore in Third Ward. Mm-hmm. And even though we were still operating online and digitally, that really meant a lot to us to have that money because we were able to buy a thermal printer for labels. We bought shipping stuff. And we bought our first set of inventory. So,
cool.
That's the first way.
All right. And what are some of your entry point into grant writing or the first ones?
As we started as a nonprofit, the bookstore came later. So grant writing has always been a part of what we do. And when I talk to people about the nonprofit model, this is why it goes beyond grants. I think to me, it's more sustainable options for funding to support your staff, your rent, all of those costs that book sales don't necessarily cover. So our grant budget this year is $215,000. I've received $161,000 so far this year from 6 grants that I've written.
Wow.
So I only have a little bit further to go. Like Liz mentioned, OSG or operational sustaining grants are your golden things that aren't tied to one specific project. But a lot of times funders are really wanting a new program or something specific to fund. We do a lot of outreach with schools, and that's a really easy way to get funding. So when we can find alternative funding for some of those things that we do, then the book sales support a different area. So it kind of just depends. A lot of our grants are through like local foundations, or community related statewide. And in the resource guide, I found a lot that were new to me when I was just searching for-profit specific bookstores. So there's a lot of good stuff there. But I think that a couple of things that I wanted to mention, like there's been a lot of talk in the news, I think, about federal grants. You may have heard, I don't know how much outside of the nonprofit world that is scary to you, but it is scary because as the larger groups and entities that receive federal grants don't receive those grants, it's going to trickle down to the smaller orgs. So I'm concerned about future funding and how much that will affect us. We don't receive federal grants except through the Arts Council, through the NEA, sometimes through the NEH. So we'll see if there's a Department of Arts and Education and any of that soon. So I think there's a lot of different ways. What I would just want to convey is beyond just grant writing, there are other sources of funding that I think for-profit stores can take advantage of just as nonprofits can.
Yeah, I wanted to share some of the early ways that we got grants. We've been around now for 14 years, so we are eligible for some of the general operating support grants that we've been getting really just within the past few years. Those tend to want to see a track record, but at the very beginning, it's always about new program, what's program it's supporting. And so we looked at what we just needed funding for most, and what we found was that we'd have story times in our neighborhood and, but the books, with tax were $20 and up and for a brand new book. And it was really hard to, it's the median incomes in the neighborhood just weren't really gelling with that. But it also was so important for us to have families come in and story times and also bilingual story times so that it could be intergenerational. So our first grant was for a Storytime family breakfast. And so the grant was in part, to have more food available so that families could come, and then also to subsidize the cost of books. Depending on the number of people that came out, we could either pay for the books and give out free books or raffle off a certain number of books or reduce the price of all the books. And then we could also then pay a small stipend to the Storytime presenter in case no books sold. So we'd have these different things and it was a pretty small grant to start, but it was just something that was, it would be great if we could do this. Here, now we can, if we can just, configure all the pieces. And then another kind of grant we got initially, which was also, small to begin with, was whenever people have come in looking for, there's a lot of like test prep materials or GED materials and like citizenship guides and depending on the prices of those, sometimes it's like $25 for the guide. And there'd be, it was tough to have, a lot of, educational material that people wanted, and be able to get it also in Spanish and to have it be at an affordable price. So one of our grants was just to subsidize the cost of that so that we could sell that $25 guide for like $10 or $5. And so we started with that. But then after a while, we got bigger so that we couldn't qualify for some of these smaller grants. But that's where we could then look at the event space, where people are doing events at the store. And and some of the grants that were only good for like really, really small groups, that group could apply for the funding so that they could, get their own refreshments and cover their own stuff and maybe, do whatever they wanted. And we could then sort of share what that information about grant writing was with the people that were using the space too.
I just want to, for those of you who might be a for-profit business that's not necessarily thinking about going the nonprofit route, but might be interested in applying for grants as a for-profit, I wanted to kind of boil down a few different ways that can happen and what you might look for. So one way is responding to an RFP or request for proposals that within which the eligibility includes for-profit businesses. Those do exist. I have seen them and applied for them. As Jamie mentioned, some of the ones she has applied for have included for-profit entities as eligible applicants. So the first thing you want to look for when you find a grant opportunity is the list. They're always going to have an eligibility list, who's eligible to apply. So that's one. A second way is working with a fiscal sponsor. So I have supported for-profit businesses who are applying for a grant under the fiscal sponsorship of a nonprofit entity that is eligible for this funding source. With this, it is important to communicate with the funder and just make sure that they understand that relationship and that it doesn't look like you're trying to just skirt the system. But if you are communicative with the funder, it is usually not a problem. Another way is that sometimes you'll find that you might be invited to apply, which I think David's going to talk a little bit more about later. And then the fourth way would be to join a collaborative effort within your community. So there might be an effort where an organization is the lead of the grant application, and then they're looking for partners who want to be a part of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those partnerships might look like.
Speaking of partnerships and relationships in general, later is now. Sometimes relationships can lead to grants. We talk about the importance of those relationships and partnerships. Those words sometimes are used, but partnerships, when people think about them, are a particular kind of thing. Do you want to run down? Yeah,
I'll just run down this list. I wanted to just kind of define in the world of grants what a partnership might be defined as. So a sub-award means you're performing a significant role in the project. They can't do this project without you. You might be a consultant in a grant, meaning you're just providing a specific service. And we're going to give examples of these. Or you might be a vendor. So the grantee, a nonprofit entity, is writing you in as they're going to purchase from your store. And so in that case, you'd be a vendor. So those are just different ways in which a partnership might show up in a grant, to give you a little bit of context of what a funder might be looking for. Do you guys want to talk about? Oh, so here's examples. So a sub-award might be a school wants to host an author week. The bookstore is budgeted to support co-planning, getting local authors to attend, conducting a workshop. So again, it's a significant role. They can't do that without your participation. A vendor, a nonprofit writing group, is hosting a retreat. They want to rent your community room for 3 days and purchase materials. And then a consultant, school district wants to hire you to consult on a new pilot program in a local elementary school library. And so the consultant versus sub-award is sometimes very important, because sometimes it comes with specific, especially with federal funding, it comes with very specific guidelines on how you build those partnerships and how you document what you've done, which is why I wanted to just delineate it here.
Yeah, I think you'll find that more and more funders I'm seeing are asking specific questions in grant applications about your partnerships and relationships in the community. They want to see community collaboration. I think that's one area that bookstores really have an advantage, because we are all about community and partnering with others in the community. So I think there's that. I think it's also, if you're new to a funder, then showing that you have established relationships can really lend a lot of credibility to your organization. If you're trying to develop that relationship with that funder, those relationships can go a long way. Similarly, if you do partner with people regularly, I always ask partners for a letter of recommendation, after we complete some kind of project together, just so that you have that on file, that you can demonstrate, no, this is a really great working relationship. They think highly of our organization. It's a good partnership that you can share with funders.
Do you want to share some of the great examples you have of partnerships you've had?
Yeah, man.
Relationships you built?
2014, in a past life, I worked as a financial aid counselor at public university in Houston, University of Houston downtown. And I worked in financial aid department. A friend of mine, she worked in the admissions department. And so we just were cool. We always were going to different things together to recruit students. We always were going to different events. And we just built a relationship over time. Shout out to Valencia. Fast forward, she ends up quitting, going back to school, getting her master's degree in marketing. And then she secured a job working for our local professional football team, Houston Texans. I get a DM on Instagram, And she's like, yo, I just got this cool job. It's community engagement. They give us a budget every year. I'm going to hook you up. And that was it. And I was like, okay, well, 6 months roll by. I get a phone call from an unknown number. I don't know about y'all, but I don't be answering unknown numbers. So I let it fly. I get a DM again in my email, and it's from Valencia. She's like, boy, you need to pick up the phone. I'm trying to call you. I was like, so I picked it up, and she starts asking me these questions like about class. And she's like, so, how much work did y'all do in the community last year? So I kind of gave her some numbers that I had. She was like, okay, what are some projects you guys are getting ready to work on? I was telling her about we do a bilingual puppet show, story time too. And told her about a poetry night, told her about the, other things that we've done. And then she's like, congratulations, David. You've been awarded with the community, blah, 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 community boost grant. And I was like, what? So I sent in my paperwork, and sure enough, in the mail came a check for $5,000. Now, the only reason why we got that is because thinking about 2014, working in those offices together and just being genuinely cool people. And that's what I put on my notes here. I said, be cool with people. You never know. You never know where it will go. And that's anybody. That's anybody that comes through your doors at your store. That's anybody you meet at the grocery store when you go picking up your eggs that are overpriced right now. Be cool with people. Treat people well. Treat people better than well. Because you never know where it might get you.
And in addition to that, make sure people know what you are doing in your community and what you're trying to do, what you haven't been able to do but would like to do. So if you're attending Chamber of Commerce meetings or just networking in your local community, start talking to people about, boy, wouldn't it be great if, and fill in the blank with your big vision. When people know what you're trying to do, they start to see the connections that you might not realize are there.
I want just a small addendum.
Yeah.
Social media. Put everything on social media. And that's how Valencia was keeping track with us, because it wasn't like we were talking every day or every week or even every month, but because she saw when we would have our events with children in the community, when she saw we were having our on-site author signings and all this, she saw all of that. And make yourself visible in as many places as possible, both physically and virtually. So I know yesterday they talked about having YouTube channels and stuff like that. And don't even focus on trying to get all the follows and stuff, but find somebody that's got a camera or set up your phone in your store and record it. When we have our poetry nights, we stream it and we make it evergreen. You can go on our Instagram right now and see those poetry nights, and people do that and people can share it. And that's helpful as well. So
back to the being cool and just making sure that everybody you're talking to and everyone you're considering as part of your community is part of your community. I feel like I'm often hearing how people are irritated with when consignment or local authors, or if the book isn't quite doesn't look quite how you'd want it to be on the shelf. There's no title on the spine, etc. And at our store, we have always really actually welcomed the local author. This is like their life's work that they've put into this, the thing. Even, there's always room for improvement. We'll maybe suggest, maybe next time put a title on the spine, next time. And, we don't have to carry a lot of copies, but just, and so one of those, we did an event with a local author. Maybe there was a title on this one, maybe there wasn't, but it was, everything was great about the event. We did our best as well as we could with any other event. And then what we didn't know is where she worked. I mean, she worked somewhere, it was like Comcast or something. And later, like a year later, I think, when she was able to, as an employee, she's able to suggest places that get money. We were one of the places. And I think she just had such a great experience and a continued relationship and could see that we tried and what we were about. And I think it's you never know where I mean, you should be nice to everybody anyway, but you also never know where they work. You don't know who they're related to. You don't know what they do outside of that time always when they're in your store, and they'll bring that experience, with them and help you out. So let's look at the parts of authenticity. We talked a little bit about social media already. Oh, one thing I did want to mention, because talking about relationships being really important. The other thing that I forgot to mention prior in our planning is the other important thing that is useful for getting ready for an application is data collection. Like there's all the qualitative stuff is really good to know, that what the narrative that people are seeing on social media, et cetera. But certain kinds of grants actually want to know hard numbers too.
Yeah.
They'll ask that, and you just do your best, to start with if you've actually tracked it, great. If you haven't actually tracked it, try and go back and do the count. And the thing that's really, I've found really valuable, even if it's been really stressful the first time I've been asked for some kind of quantitative thing I wasn't tracking, is if I continue to apply for that grant in future years, to see how that number grows, or to see how, if it doesn't grow, what other kinds of routes went deeper and why it didn't grow, but just being able to tell the story of that as well. But those numbers and the stories really can paint a picture together and make an application really strong.
I love analytics. Analytics is your friend.
So do funders.
Analytics. So the picture that's on here, that's actually our merch, some of our merch that we use some of the grant funding to make. True story, when we applied for a grant through the city of Houston, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and that's when we finally got it on the third try, that was one of the things that we put. We were like, promotion, because we were like, hey, here's our analytics. We want to get it up to this amount of draw. This is what we currently have. Also, another way, I would say old school way, but we do it. We have a mailing list. We have an e-newsletter, right? And we take it everywhere with us. Everywhere. We take it to every pop-up, every on-site event, off-site event, and we call it our attendance roll, right? Playing into the whole class motif. And so people are like, oh, what is this? I'm like, oh, it's an email thing. It's like, oh, okay. So we say, hey, if you follow us on Instagram and sign our email list, we'll give you a free bookmark. Boom. We're already giving the bookmarks away for free anyway. If you buy something, you're going to get, but to say that, it makes people feel good. Like, wow, I'm giving you my email address and I'm getting something that I can take with me. And it has all our information on it, front and back. It's perfect. So, definitely, gather information as often, as frequently as you can, and promise people that you're not going to bug them, because we send an email once a week. That's it. We make it super easy, but we put as much information in there as possible, and we make everything clickable so that we can track those analytics, and we can make sure that people are seeing the stuff that we're putting out. And even if they're not able to come to an event, because we recorded it and we did a recap, we put the recap video in the newsletter too, so people don't feel left out.
Yeah, I think everything that they've said about authenticity, I think, is really important. I think always being yourself and not trying to be something that you think funders might want you to be, but being true to what your mission is. Even if you don't have a mission statement written down, I bet you all have a mission that you follow in your heart for your store. I never think that being vulnerable is a bad thing with funders, and, being honest about your situation and what's going on with your store. As long as you stay honest and true to yourself, and you have that relationship to create a deeper relationship with them. Like David said, sometimes it takes a couple of years. Sometimes it takes a couple of grant cycles before you develop that relationship enough. And like Veronica said, sometimes it takes a few years for you to be more established so that they are willing to take a bet on you with funding. So you do have to kind of create that relationship. If you start off being inauthentic, that's not going to create a pathway for funding.
And I just want to echo the importance of building relationships with funders directly. So we've talked a lot about relationships with community members and how you build those. And work those to your advantage and find a synergy. But it's extremely important to communicate when they allow it with funders before, during, and after applying for funding. Yeah. So they don't want you to spend time on something that is not a fit with their priorities. And they're often willing to have conversations about what you're looking to do and give you feedback on, well, that's not quite a great fit. Just this morning, I was in such a conversation with a funder and a client before I came here. And as we talked through it, we did find some opportunities. Well, the grants aren't necessarily a way you're not a fit for that, but we do have sponsorships. Tell us about your events that you're having. Yeah. And so really that funder communication, I cannot emphasize the importance of it enough. And I think oftentimes what I see as a consultant is that people might be nervous to talk to those who hold the purse strings, and it's not, they really want to be supportive is what I have found over the years.
A lot of these grants also have info sessions that you can attend that are online. And at those sessions, they ask other people for questions. I'm a nervous person who wouldn't outright email a funder, but I would attend the info session, and then often someone else asks the question. And if they don't, then you can slip it into, the comments or something to ask as well.
Just one other point with that is that if you're not communicating with the funder, then what they know about you is only what's on paper, right? Computer, paper, whatever. Mm-hmm. If you are communicating with them, they see the depth of what you are doing and the impact you're trying to have in the community in ways that you maybe haven't figured out how to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so that is just another reason why I think that's so important.
I think it's always important to reach out and have those conversations, those one-on-ones. If you have a funder and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if I qualify, or maybe I don't qualify based on these things, but I would like to reach out to them and say, hey, I just want to introduce myself. If there are any funding opportunities coming up, I keep a list of possible funders to reach out to, and then kind of lean in on staff, on volunteers, on customers for do you have connections to these places in town? And then invite them to things. When we have extra tickets for events or we have something special going on at the bookstore, I just invite them, and I don't always get a response, but a lot of times we do. And then that's a great in-person way to introduce them to your work, especially if something that you're inviting them to is something, that you want funding for. Yeah.
So they're also part of funding networks. So I have also found, including this morning in the meeting I had, have you thought about applying to X, Y, or Z? Here's this other opportunity that we're familiar with, and maybe that's a good fit for you.
And just a little tag on the in-person things. Yes, if you can go. But if you're not, if that's not your personality type, if you are, if you're I don't do the large crowds, party element, make sure you have somebody on your staff that you can go and send as your representative that understands your mission, that understands who you are, because that's a part of being authentic too, right? We don't want you having a panic attack because that ruins everything. Right. So have somebody that's on your team, have someone on your team that you trust, that you love, that knows your mission, that can, speak for you and be a proper representative.
Yeah, the showing up at places and being authentic and the application reminded me that there's the official funder, this unnamed, but also a lot of these grants actually have juries, panelists, people who are putting their input in on the grant, and they're in related fields. So some of the grants that we apply for, I've sat on juries for different arts grants or, literature-based ones or ones that are, multidisciplinary. And so on one hand, if I'm, and many other people who, I've found out later were juries for grants that we've gotten, and I'll realize oh man, that person knew me, but it's maybe good that they knew me.
Yeah.
But that's the other reason why you don't want to be too fake in the application, because if they know you and they know what's different between what they've heard and, casually and what's on paper, they'll really know, and they will inform, it's not that they make the final call usually, but they do inform what the final decision is.
Yeah.
And you can get, a recent grant that we got, we ended up getting a much higher amount of funding, even more than we'd applied for.
Dang.
Because the panel score was high. So we got an extra $21,000 on a DCLA grant just because the panel score was high.
That's awesome.
Like the panel itself liked it. And that has not happened to us before. It's a one-time thing. It's something we can't rely on for future. But, whoever that group of people is not the staff of the funder. It's not, the executives. And I don't know, maybe we'll never be there again as a panel. But, you never know who's there, who's in the room. Okay. So are you ready to apply for grant or find non-traditional funding? Getting ready to find grants. Do you want to start with some of the, I know you've done the full stuff.
Going back to the City of Houston grant, that was our largest grant that we've received to date. And yes, reading through that application is very important. And answering the questions that they ask you is important. Answering the questions they ask you is important. Connect with funders before, during, and after. So during this process, there were certain dates and times that we had to hop on Zoom or Teams or Google Chat. Do that. Do not miss those days. Do not miss those times. I fortunately work a day job. And so during and I have an office, so I'm able to kind of block off those times. And I have a sign on my door that says, hey, I'm in a Zoom meeting, but they don't know I'm not in a job-related Zoom meeting. I'm in a Zoom meeting. And I'm not lying because I am in a Zoom meeting. But being at those meetings matters, right? Because they are giving you pertinent information. There might be something that changes on the application and you're doing the application one way and you submit it and it's like, yes, I did it. No, go according to pace. And always do try to consider the funder's perspective, right? Like treat them like they are an alien from another planet and really paint the picture, tell the story. Like you might have heard that, like find your story. What's the story of your bookstore, right? Like creating that and crafting that narrative for people so that they can paint the picture in their mind because they might not ever come to your store. They might not ever go to a YouTube channel and watch what you do with kids or watch what you do with offsite events or whatever. But if you can paint that picture in a way that is meaningful and it sparks their imagination, you got it.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I think everything David said is great. I think knowing a way to tell your story in a concise way is really important to you because a lot of people don't read everything. I mean, you might have found that to be true. So, sometimes, the most concise way you can tell your story, the better. I would just say grants take time. So being aware of that timeline for the grants, being aware of other deadlines you have going on in the rest of your life. There are a lot of times where I'm like, this grant's due in 2 hours. I gotta not, knock it out. So planning out your time for that and then keeping materials that you can recycle. So evergreen things once you write the overview of your store, then just save it and use it again.
Yeah.
Update it, but don't do your work multiple times. Just do it once.
Treat it like you applying for scholarships.
Right.
Yeah.
I think too, just be really clear on what you're going to do and why that your community needs it and how it's been informed by your community. That's another question that I see now on almost every grant application is how do you know that your community needs this? How is this community informed? And then also another piece of advice is only commit to what you have the capacity to track in the end. So if you're going to, let's say, start a program for students in your bookstore, and you're going to say, over the course of a year, we're going to serve 200 students and X% are going to be from this demographic or that demographic. Mm-hmm. If you're not tracking those demographics, then you're going to disappoint the funder at the end of the year. If you don't have a way of tracking or you don't want to for various reasons, then be clear about why that's not something that you're going to track and what your metrics are going to be, what the impact, how you are going to show the impact.
I was thinking of the very first time I ever wrote a grant, and I was just overwhelmed with how to start. And I realized I could just find someone who'd written a grant that was successful and then copy it and like change the info. I mean, not for the same grant. It was even for a different industry entirely, but just the way that they concisely put everything about the grant in the first line, the way that they, were very respectful in the language, the way, the clarity of it, all of that stuff. There's a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of just grant writing workshops or just other people in the room who've written grants. And I think that even if it's across industry and there's a lot who in the same industry who would definitely be helpful, and who would want to help. And the other thing you mentioned earlier about, tracking the grants that you want to apply for, like we also have a basic, a spreadsheet of, the grants and the due dates. And I don't refer to as much as I did in the earlier days, but it was useful because then I could anticipate. I'd maybe catch every other deadline. Sometimes I would too much going on. I didn't apply in time, but then I knew it was probably going to be due around the same time the next year. So then after a while, now we're used to different cycles. It can get really consuming to, and to give yourself that timeline, because you need to leave time to edit at the end. You need time to work out the budget. I always leave that for too late. And then I'm scrambling, but if you're a little nervous about numbers, make sure that you leave time to do a well thought out budget that you can actually do a little bit of research on. But I found that once I had a sense of when things were coming up, I could be blocking off more time and not be doing a school fair right before this grant was due. I could put it on our shared general coordination calendar, so people knew that leading up to when X or Y grant was due, I might be less available that week. And also other people in our collective could then help. They could, maybe pull together different things that we needed, if we needed to pull together a group of flyers that were relevant, etc.
I can't tell you how many times that I've waited too late and then talked to our person who works with schools and be like, oh my God, can you send me photos from this free book fair we did? Can't find them. Can you please, and it's last minute, then you stress your colleagues out. I use Monday. We use Monday.com to sort a lot of our stuff. Just not the best tool, but it's what we have. And it tracks my deadlines and everything so that it'll remind me when things are coming up. And if I set those a little bit out, then I'm okay, I need to do the budget now, and I need to see if anything's changed in the project. And that just helps me stay a little bit more organized for deadlines.
Speaking of deadlines, every funder will probably tell you, do not be the person submitting at 4:59 when it's due at 5:00, and always try and be 24 hours ahead, because you really don't know. Their system might have a problem. There are things that are potentially out of your control that might come into play. And so just try to always give yourself an earlier deadline than the actual deadline.
One kind of miscellaneous tip that I found, if there was the thing when you're on the receiving end reading the grant as a panelist, if there's too many questions, too many unknowns, people can't really evaluate properly. And I found that when, if I am encountering as the grant writer, the unknown, something I'm not sure about, a question, you want to anticipate that question, and then you can always turn it in, spin it differently. Spin it as something that you are going to track and evaluate after you do this thing. Or, there's don't leave those unknowns. Anticipate what those questions are going to be and answer them before the person who's going to read your application will have that question and then not be able to judge and have to dismiss it.
That reminds me of just one other thing that I've learned over the years, is in this room of readers and writers, when you use language we would like to, it still gives a little bit of doubt. So I really always use language of we will. This is what we're going to do. This is the impact we're going to have.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I learned over, time is just you you're the pro, like, and act like it then in a grant. I mean, there's no one who knows your store better than you.
Nope.
So have that come across also in the writing and what they're reading. And if for whatever reason you don't get the grant, you can try again, and eventually it happens. But also often there are sessions that they offer where that you can call and set up an appointment to find out what the specific reasons were. And the few times that I've done that, I've been able to fix it for the next time. We didn't have enough of this, or maybe the sample was not the kind of sample that gave them a good picture of what was going on, etc.
I think that's really important to remember. I think no matter if you get a grant or not, you don't want to disappear from that funder's radar. So staying in touch with them, not just like sending a thank you note, but making sure that they still see you for that next grant cycle. I did want to mention too, while you're thinking about writing a grant, looking at the time that it's going to take to do it, and then the time for the reporting. There's always reporting involved. So they're not going to just give you money and be like, cool, go do your thing. Bye. They're going to want results, unfortunately. There are a couple of grants that I will no longer apply for because of the time commitment involved. It takes so long to do the grant, and then all the reporting stuff, they want you to check in all this time, and it's not that big of a grant. So you have to weigh your time and what is it worth it to you for your time commitment to put that in. So I think checking that out and making sure you feel really comfortable about the money that you could possibly get, because you're not going to always get the money that you ask for. Not everybody's as lucky as getting $20,000 extra. That's amazing. But making sure that you have that investment in mind before applying.
Yeah. So also the how to find grants, there is that handout. If you came in late, it's in the app. There's a handout, and that handout you click on. I don't think there are physical copies of this handout. Are there, PK?
Yes, they will be available on bookweb.org.
Okay.
Nice.
So those have links that have been compiled by the panelists that you can start, where you can start that search instead of.
The other thing is if you just put into your search engine, U.S. Chamber of Commerce small business grants. I think some of the ones that on the list came from there, but there's a page, it says like 65 different grants available to small businesses. And it's a pretty comprehensive list. And then there are people like me, but there are many consultants who will curate a list for you if you're in a position to work with one.
There's a whole page. Before we turn it over to Q&A, is there a takeaway that you want to share?
Relationships.
She took mine. Have your information gathered, right? If you've already applied for a grant before and it asks you for certain things, have like on your Google Drive, if you use Google, or have somewhere safe where you can retrieve those things immediately. Pictures, your story, right? Your narrative and your numbers, and just have those things readily available so that when the next grant opportunity comes along, you can easily get to it.
Yeah. And I just say, like, cash is great. We all want cash, but there's other stuff that you can apply for too. Like, you're having a graphic novel workshop with kids. There are places you can apply to get like sketch pads, colored pencils, things like that, so you don't have to spend your money on those. And then I know I keep saying alternative sources of funding, not just grants. Like this year, we've started a program where we have small businesses giving us $2,000 a month to encourage extra donations at the register. So as a match, and like people are doing that. And it's kind of wild to me. But like, I just asked them to sponsor us for no specific program. So I think just developing those relationships with those people, like your vendors or other people in the community who rely on you, neighbors, partners, community members are wanting to support you, especially right now. So don't be afraid to ask them to support you.
My one takeaway would be to look at your store and all the different parts that make it up, because there's the part where you do events. There's the literary events. There's maybe the non-book events you do. There's the walls of the gallery. There's the space outside. There's mutual aid work. There's a lot of stuff that we've gotten different kinds of grants for that all feed into what the bookstore is doing overall, but different kinds of grants, maybe, we fit in different ways. And so sometimes it's really general, but it doesn't, you can be eligible for a lot more if you look at all the different pieces too. Okay, questions?
We've got microphones. You need to speak right close to them. I'll get you. You go forward.
First of all, thank y'all so much. It was really food for thought on some stuff we as a store have been thinking about. One of the big ones for us is wanting to have a funding arm for large scale school events in public schools where, families can't always afford to buy books for their kids. And then there's this delay between when we know we might have money for that and when we have to pitch for these authors, right? Which is months out without any funding in place. So we've long dreamed of a partnership with the foundation for our school system that handles nonprofit stuff and a local corporation. FedEx is in our city, for example. Is it ever appropriate to come up with that grant proposal to give to them? Sure. To paint this picture of twice a year, we could sponsor, we had, for example, we did something similar a few years ago with Nick Stone. We gave away 800 copies to several schools that gathered through the School Seed Foundation that was funded by a corporation. But it was so precarious down the stretch. We were just juggling all these balls. Can we make this happen? And so we dreamed of a day when it would be this baked in twice a year. You have this money, you can pitch for these authors and bring them to town. If you have that vision and take it to a corporation, does that ever work?
I think it can. I think that, it's going to be dependent on the corporation. So there are I have a client who used to get a lot of money from Wells Fargo, for example, because they used to have discretionary funding. Now they have a specific grants process. And even though they have strong relationships, they can't get funding in the same way. So it really is dependent on the company, but the more you build those relationships with your contacts there and invite them to the things that you're doing and make sure they know what you're trying to do, the more ground you have, the more foundation you have to potentially present a proposal and even ask that, can we present a proposal?
Yeah, I'll say it with our FedEx locally too. We asked them if they'd help with deliveries for school visits this past year. And then a month later, they loved it so much. A month later, they invited us to apply for a $5,000 grant. So relationships, but also similarly, I never know what authors are going to be available next fall. So, and what we can exactly do. So I just make it very generic. And I'm hey, we've done this before with Nick Stone. Wouldn't it be great if we could have another author do this and reach 800 more kids? And so that's our plan. We're planning to do that next fall. We'll decide on the authors, but that's the kind of thing we're doing. I think it's a great idea.
Hi, thank you all again. Veronica, you mentioned a tracker. So my first question, I actually have two. This one's straightforward. Is it just a Google sheet? And if it's straightforward, if it's complicated, could you share how, set up a link somewhere you could share a blank version? And if not, I think, Jamie, I think you mentioned Monday.com, Notion. Then is that the kind of tool you'd recommend? And then the second question is, when you were y'all were asking who's nonprofit, who's not, I think somewhere in there was a mention of being a for-profit, but having a section or a wing. What does that look like?
Nonprofit arm.
Yeah.
I think the specifics of the models would be something probably more comprehensively covered tomorrow. I looked at that slide deck for tomorrow's nonprofit session, and it'll go into more depth on that. In terms of the things that we're tracking, did you mean the potential grants coming up? For me, it's a Google sheet where I put what the grant is called, the link to it, the deadline, and then the key thing we'd be applying for, the angle that we're going to take. I think it even says angle, and then, a note to myself for if we got it or if we didn't get it and how much we applied for, so that we have that quick at a glance record. I realized one thing that in terms of tracking the stuff that we often get asked that we've needed to collect better data on and have over the years now are, there's always the question of if you do events, how many people attend the events, how many events you do. But then more specifically, there's a lot of kids questions specifically that come up. There's a lot of grants that are for youth development, perhaps. So then sometimes asking, whether it's like how old the kids are, what the range is, what's specific for teens. But then also, we also track like what language the event is in, whether it's in English or Spanish, whether there's interpretation, whether it was a bilingual event. And then we also track the numbers of like non-book events we do. If there's a film screening that maybe also had a book involved, because then we're on the lookout for things that apply for maybe more general art space grants that include literary stuff. And we're starting to track now, like in one of our locations, we've been tracking the number of people that come in, period. And at first it seemed insane to do it, but it was a little easier at the second space. And it's a matter of getting people used to doing those. It's just really simple tally marks. But then, and we had one person who was like, one person who was tallying them at the end of the week, but it's over time to see the development of it. That's been amazing. So now we're trying to do it at the other location too. I don't know if it's going to work, but
I do have a Google Sheets template that I have developed that I've started using very regularly with clients that I'm happy to share if you want to come up after.
Yeah. I'm happy to share anything as well if you want to email me.
I just wanted to address the question about the Community Education Foundation and working with that. You may want to check into donor advice funds. There are some communities that have like a community foundation and it's all made out of donor advice funds where families have funds of their own that they can give out. And there's less restrictions. Sometimes I just only have to fill out a page and say, hey, this is what I want to do in the schools. But I also want to say you should partner with their PTOs. The PTO at my son's school, I write a lot of grants for them and we're a 501c3 and we've gotten a lot of grants that way. And then they partner with the bookstore or another community partner. And it's been really great for everyone in our community. And when they're cutting things like author visits and other things, we're able to do them again because we've gotten a grant. And it's a little bit easier to deal with. Donor advised funds. Yeah, I can explain separately after.
So we started looking for grants at the end of last year. And something we come across a lot is grants that have like a paywall to submit or databases that have a paywall to be a part of. What are your thoughts on that? And are there any that are worth it?
Very much like a scholarship. If you are paying people for them to give you money, that is a red flag. Do not do it.
Yeah. In all my years, I've never seen an application that has a paywall. There absolutely are databases that you can become a member of. They range from $150 a year on up. And some of them, it really depends on how much you're going to pursue grants. So if this is going to be something that is a regular stream of income for you, paying a couple $100s a year might be worthwhile, at least for the first year, to see how much you get out of that.
I did sign up for one of those for a month, I think for like $15. And then it was overwhelming, all the grants that I was like, I don't have time to apply for these grants. So then I stopped doing it because the ones that we do apply for are not part of it.
It can really help you curate the opportunities for sure.
Does applying for and receiving money outside of your general geography help you get money inside of your general geography? Like, do they know each other well? Is there a kind of way of thinking about the split, like apply for 30% grants outside of your, state or out of your municipality and then 70 inside? Like is there a rule there? Is there a tactic there, a strategy?
In my experience, what a funder wants to know is that in most cases, they're not the only source of funding. So I don't think I've ever had anybody ask how much of it is out of state versus in state. What they want to know is, are we funding 100% of this project, which feels unsustainable to them? And so kind of going back to the tips, I guess, is know how you're going to continue whatever that project is beyond the life of the funding, because nobody wants you to be 100% grant dependent. on at least their funding, right? So they want to see that you have various sources of income. We're going to contribute 10% from our store of the cost. We're going to have grants fund 70%, and we're going to have individual donors fund 20%. So that's more important than where their funding comes from.
Good. Last question.
Sorry, this is not a question, but I'm just going to note that a lot of those foundation databases are available in the public libraries. So like the Foundation Center, for example, I can just go to the public library and I can search it there for free.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can you hear you?
Sorry, I was just saying that the databases where you can search for grants to apply for, sometimes they're available at the public libraries.
Yes.
Oh.
So like Foundation Center, which has got
Yep.
like loads and loads of different grants, you can just go to the library and search
Yes.
for free.
Okay.
Oh, we're done.
Yeah.
We've reached the end.
We've reached the
Over
end.
here. Thank you so much. Please evaluate the session. Apparently, there's a competition for which sessions are most evaluated, and if someone wins bad cat art, I don't know who wins the bad
Someone
cat
will
art.
win it.
I don't know, but
I know.
The admiration of our peers.
Yeah.
also our emails and are on this slide that I am just going to now.
That's good, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!